representative for the Caribbean Association for Feminist Research and Action, a regional network of feminists that are committed to understanding the relationship between the oppression of women and other forms of oppression in society. Crystal, please.
Thank you, Magda. Good afternoon, everyone. This will be a very brief presentation. It is really just giving you a snapshot of the Trinidad and Tobago situation. So today I will be talking about the implementation of the UNTOC and the role of civil society, especially as it relates to the promotion of gender and human rights. So briefly, we have specific legal mechanisms in Trinidad and Tobago. We are party to the convention as well as the various protocols, the relevant legislation, and this is just this is not all of the legislation. We have the Criminal Offences Act, we have the Offences Against the Persons Act, Proceeds of Crime Act, Anti-Gang Act, Computer Misuse, Trafficking in Persons, Children's Act, Domestic Violence. Now, as you can see, this is really a large suite of legislation. So it is clear that the intent of the state is there to combat organized crime. But as with every good intent, sometimes there is some challenge or difficulty in the implementation or the application of the legislation. So organized crime and gender-based violence. I think over the past 2 days, we would all have a very good idea of what gender-based violence is. And as we all know, it is closely linked to organized crime. You have a proliferation of gangs. And as a result of that, you have an upsurge or a rise in violent crime, which will result in the exploitation of women. Now, specific to Trinidad and Tobago, in our society, we have two major gangs, which drives most of the criminal activity. The first gang is Rasicity, the second one is Muslim. Now, you have smaller offshoots that break off from those major gangs. These include Six, EBG, Bombay, Tyson. Now, activities for those gangs, they are no longer limited just to drugs. They have extended their work into illegal quarrying. We have the black market sale of US dollars. Home invasions are rampant right now in Trinidad and Tobago. They've also gone into event promotion. And I will go into that later on in the presentation because there's a correlation between culture and music and these gangs as well. And of course, they engage in counterfeiting activities. Now, while the overwhelming majority of these gangs, it is male, women's participation tends to be, for example, the concealment of weapons and drugs for members of the gangs, the registration and incorporation of businesses in order to launder money, because the gangs, they would make a lot of money from their illegal activities. But then what can you do with that illegal money? You would have to find some way to clean that money, and that is where the businesses come in, the legitimate businesses. These women also provide accounting services for the businesses. And what happens a lot as well is that the women, some of these women would, as we say in Trinidad and Tobago, set up members of rival gangs to be killed by that particular gang. And of course, they provide alibis for the gang members when they are questioned by police. Now, gang culture and its impact on women and girls, this is a very under-researched area. So a lot of what I'm giving you today is anecdotal evidence. It is based on my conversations with women who are affiliated with those gangs and with gang members themselves. So this is definitely an area that requires a lot of research, because in order to come up and implement targeted interventions, we would need the research, right? We would need the data. Now, these gangs are extremely violent, and members are encouraged to embrace a hyper-violent masculine persona. We've discussed that before. The more violent you are, the higher you would reach in the gang. Now, sexual violence frequently occurs, and women and girls are often seen as playthings, as objects to be used by the gang. Now, in these situations, it is highly unlikely that these women and girls can exercise any form of sexual agency to negotiate a sexual relationship within the context of a gang. So this would result in rape, forced pregnancy, sexual exploitation. And that has a whole other offshoot of issues, because if you're talking about forced pregnancy, then I have known situations where the teenager, they would want to get an abortion. Now, terminations in Trinidad and Tobago is legal in only very limited circumstances. It is the health and life exception. It is not just because, it is not a matter of choice. You have to fall within those particular categories, and therefore these women and girls might probably be exempt from those categories, and they will be forced to seek alternate methods of terminating the pregnancy, which would then lead to, if they do not have the money to procure a safe abortion, because safe abortions, as in any country that prohibits abortion, is available once you have the money to pay to procure the abortion. Now, the unsafe abortion would result in these women and girls presenting at our public health hospitals, institutions, suffering from sepsis, perforation of uterus, all of these conditions which are as a result of desperation and unsafe abortion. Now, in terms of STIs, again, you are dealing with a situation where these women and girls, they are not, one, they may not be educated in terms of STIs, because Trinidad has a very strange relationship with comprehensive sexuality education. It is not taught in any significant way in the school system. So therefore, you have a situation where our prepubescents, our teens, they do not get that information that they should have in order to really navigate life safely. So STIs is another issue. And of course, you have the mental and physical trauma of whatever sexual exploitation that was inflicted upon them. Now, I wanted to touch upon the impact of culture on organized crime. You find in certain countries, gangs are very interrelated with music and with a particular genre or subgenre of music. The same obtains in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a particular genre of music that is called Trinidad. Now, Trinidad is taking elements from, borrowing largely from dancehall music in Jamaica. Now, the difference is that Trinidad music is inherently violent. The more violent, the better. The more you promote organized crime, killing your opponents, the use of drugs. If you were to look at any video for Trinidad, it promotes guns heavily in the video. Now, there's this disclaimer at the start of all the videos that the guns that you see in this video are just props. They are not real. But come on, I mean, a lot of them are real. Now, the themes that are dealt with in Trinidad, violent topics, you're talking about gang affiliation, and of course, there's the normalization of gender-based violence. Because in these videos, you would see women and girls as well who are affiliated with the gangs, who would have gang tattoos. They may not be members, but they're affiliated. They have gang tattoos. They would throw up gang signs. So they are in that gang culture. And therefore, when I say normalization of gender-based violence, if they are victims of gender-based violence, they may not even see themselves as victims of gender-based violence because they see it as just being part and parcel of being close to this gang, because my child father is a member of this gang, my father is a member of this gang, my brother, my friend, whoever it may be. Now, Trinidad and Tobago, we have a very pressing issue with trafficking in women and girls that has largely been driven by the economic, political, social issues that are happening in Venezuela. I don't know if you all know, but Trinidad is very, very close to Venezuela geographically. So we have, I would say for the past 10 years, we have had really an influx of refugees, asylum seekers. And also what has happened is that the criminals and the gangs, they have sought to exploit that situation. So now you have an increase of trafficking in women and girls. Now, Trinidad and Tobago is a source, transit, and a destination country for trafficking in persons. And according to the US watch list, we are actually a tier 2 country. Now, we have a lot of issues working against us. We have extremely porous borders. So the points of entry are numerous where these boats come across from Venezuela. The town that they come from a lot is called Tucapita in Venezuela, and they come across to Trinidad. And they enter beaches which do not have immigration customs personnel. So they come, covertly. And a lot of them would come, a lot of these women and girls, teenagers, they would come because they were promised a better life. They were promised jobs in Trinidad and Tobago, but when they actually get to Trinidad, they realize that they really are victims of trafficking. Their passports and other documents would be taken away from them, and they would be set up in these brothel type places where they would then have to work as sex workers. And the issue is also further exacerbated by the thirst, I would say, of local men for these largely Venezuelan sex workers. Now, the state has done a lot of work in terms of combating organized crime, and I would say that they do recognize the very crucial link between gender, human rights, and organized crime. So these are some of the mechanisms that were set up by the state. You have a victim and witness support unit. That is a unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. There's a witness protection program, which is a robust program in terms of the rest of the Caribbean, but of course it can be improved. There's the Criminal Injuries Compensation Act, where a victim of crime can, I wouldn't say recoup some losses, but be given some measure of compensation because of the trauma of experiencing crime. There's also preventative measures like the Citizen Security Program, and this is a program which is led by the Ministry of National Security and funded by the IDB. You also have the police youth clubs, which are a crucial entry point in terms of providing some kind of psychosocial intervention. An organization that I worked with, we targeted the police youth clubs some years ago because, as I mentioned before, we do not have a comprehensive sexuality education program in our schools, and we went through the police youth clubs because we were holding a health and family life education quiz targeted 12 to 15-year-olds, and we could not access those same children, even though they are school-age children, by going through the Ministry of Education, because it is a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. So we went through the police youth clubs, and it was really, it was an awesome, awesome initiative. Now, civil society mechanisms. Civil society really bears the brunt of organized crime and the link with gender and human rights. I've just listed a few of the organizations. Here you have the Living Waters community, which focuses almost exclusively on migrants and refugees, largely again from Venezuela. They have partnered throughout the years with the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and they provide some education to migrant children, which is another issue where migrant children's their human rights are being removed, because under our Education Act, non-nationals cannot receive free education in Trinidad and Tobago. In Trinidad and Tobago, free education is available from pre-K all the way up to tertiary level. Free education. But non-nationals cannot receive free education. If those migrant parents have the means to do so, they can send their child to a private institution. But if you are fleeing economic hardship in Venezuela and you're coming to Trinidad and Tobago to work for minimum wage, where are you getting the money to then send your child to a private school? So that is an area that a lot of organizations, NGOs, have been advocating for the government to make some changes, because to see these children out on the streets at all times of the day is very heartbreaking. Another organization you have is Caribbean Center for Human Rights. Now they focus largely on providing psychosocial and legal support to migrants and asylum seekers. You also have the Women's Institute for Alternative Development, WINAD, and they have really conducted a lot of research, groundbreaking research, on empowering women and girls to prevent and address the impact of small arms. They deal a lot with guns, small arms guns. And that is the end of my presentation. Again, it was short. It was just to give a brief snapshot into what obtains in Trinidad and Tobago. And I hope that you found some of the information to be useful. Thank you.
A very interesting presentation and all the issues that you unpacked there. I have a question about the Trinidad, because I'm quite interested in the link between structured culture and organized crime. But before I ask you a question on mental health, does anyone have any questions?
Yes. Yes, I heard you said that migrants that enter Trinidad, their children cannot get a free education.
That's true.
So that means Trinidad government did not sign on to the convention.
We did.
So you actually, okay.
Yes, flouting of international law, yes. And someone is here from the, the Human Rights Department units of the Attorney General. So maybe she can give an update into what is happening there with that particular treaty. I don't mean to put on the spot. You don't have to do it. Sorry, I don't have to do it.
So, but I will say this much. So I will say this much. Trinidad and Tobago has signed the 1951 Refugee Convention and the 1967 Protocol. However, we've not ratified or incorporated the convention. And as we know in international law, as a dualist country, we do not just automatically conform to international law by saying we need to have incorporation. So as a dualist state, we have not incorporated the legislation. So therefore we're not bound by the legislation. We are still at the point where, as a country, we are supposed to act in good faith. But the reality is there are a lot of things that need to be implemented first before we could incorporate. So we do not have the relevant systems as yet, but the government is working towards that. So in the stead of that, so in 2019 we had the migrant registration program where 16,000 plus migrants were registered and given the opportunity to vote and earn a salary. The Ministry of Education is considering having migrant children enter into the schools. However, they require partnership. So Ministry of National Security through the Immigration Division have to make certain amendments to the Immigration Act to facilitate the children being able to go to the schools. So I don't want it to be said or thought that the government is not making a concerted effort. There are certain systems that need to be put in place before, and